Hey everybody, this is Les and Christy, and this is the Easy Farms Podcast, where we are doing things from the ground up. We're here to help guide your homesteading adventure and hopefully make the journey a little easier. So as far as a little background on us, we both grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, actually within a few miles of each other, but never met until I was in my late 20s. Christy was younger. And when we got married and started having kids, almost right away, we both had kind of this desire to move further out. So we moved to one of the small towns outside of Memphis, but it was still a subdivision, and I was feeling kind of hemmed in, is the way I remember it. And when we built our house out there, I wanted a corner lot because at least that way you could get around behind your house to, unload stuff, do stuff, that sort of thing. But all those lots were taken. And I remember feeling cramped because our house was literally 10 feet off the houses next to us. And we had never owned a house where we had the neighbor behind us house. And it was when we were at this location, there was a cow field behind us that has since then become a massive subdivision. And I always wanted to be able to drive around my house. It had that much elbow room. And this subdivision was certainly not it. So we found a place in the next county out and found 5 acres out there where the kids could just kind of run crazy, run free, and,
I remember, though, going back a little bit before we found that, is we were homeschooling our 4 kids. They were very young. Our youngest one was about 2 years old, just a little before 2, or actually about a year and a half old. And I took the kids on a field trip way out in the country. And I took the kids on a field trip, and that was back in the day when everybody didn't have cell phones at the level we have them now. So you bought maybe 60 minutes, and that was it. And you had it for the whole month, and it was basically used just for emergency purposes. So I left that field trip because I caravanned with everybody out there from our neighborhood or in our homeschool area. But I had to leave a little earlier, and I had to leave on my own. And I remember calling Les and telling him, I am in the middle of nowhere. And it felt a little scary because I really didn't know exactly my route back home because you didn't have GPS. You had to rely on maps, paper maps. And I didn't have one at the time. So I finally just kept driving on this road until I came to a familiar major road that I recognized that would get me home. And little did we know that God had intended for us to move. 6 months later, we ended up having our house up for sale. We had bought 5 acres just 2 miles from where that homeschooling field trip was. And at that time, when I was taking the field trip to the kids, we weren't talking about moving out. But God had other plans. And so we did. We started looking around, and we found this beautiful 5 acres. And we just started going and stepping in faith at this point. What do we need to do next? We didn't have a lot of money. I was a stay-at-home mom, and Les had his own business. And, I had given up my career to raise my children. So we were down to one income, and, we had to budget that. So at that point, we were absolutely walking in faith from there.
So the property we bought was 5 acres. It was fenced. The front half of it was pretty heavily wooded. The back half was open. There was this huge tree that was out there. And it looked like one of those trees that a kid would draw, with the trunk and then the big, almost rounded looking leaves and branches. And we put a 45-foot high rope swing in that tree. And life kind of centered around that tree. There were 2 small ponds, and the property came with a single wide mobile home on it that was in bad shape. You could tell that when you pulled up. And so we were talking to the guy that owned it, and he was talking about the property. And I said, well, how much is the property without the single wide mobile home on it? He said, well, the price I'm asking is for the land. The mobile home is your problem. And we kind of started talking about other things, and that statement ran past me. And we closed on the property, and we started spending time out there doing things. And about the second time we went out there, I realized what he meant by the mobile home is your problem. Because it was a mess. It really was. It had been totally used up.
It was old. It was very old.
Yeah, it was like a 1980s mobile home, single wide mobile home. And we went out there one time, my oldest son and I went out there to work on it sometime, just do little fixer-uppers around there to see what we could do with it. And as we pulled up, it was like the whole thing was moving. And it was like, well, it's kind of tied to the ground, so it can't really move. And then as we got closer, we realized it wasn't the mobile home. It was the wasps flying all around it. And when I say flying all around it, I mean covering it. There were thousands of them all over, flying all around the outside of it. So we got out and we kind of went around to the sliding door on the back of it and, kind of slowly opened it up, thinking, okay, let's don't get stung. Let's be careful out here because there's wasps everywhere. And we opened the door and stepped inside, and there were thousands of wasps inside as well. And so we found a small shop vac and a can of bug spray and went through sucking wasps up and squirting the bug spray into the shop vac to try and clear the rooms, at least, of all the wasps for what we could. But when we started getting into it, it was like, oh yeah, this is a problem. But we did a whole bunch of work on it and replaced carpet, scrubbed cabinets, put down some new subfloor where the washer and dryer had literally rotted through the floor from leaking. And we actually moved into it for a short period of time, and it was literally like camping in a box. It was quite a mess.
When we moved into it, we didn't have any issues with mobile homes. That was not the issue. This one, though, was so old that there was holes in the wall. We could see there was no insulation. You could turn the lights out in a room and you could see the gaps between the floor and the wall where the sunlight would actually come up from the bottom. So it wasn't the issue that the fact that this was a single wide home. We think those are fine living. And a lot of people who move out to the country do choose a mobile home, whether it be a single wide, double wide. It was the fact that this was in such terrible shape. But like I said earlier, we didn't have a lot of money, and, we prayed about it. We knew God had led us to this land. All the other pieces of property that we looked at, we just kept coming back to this piece, and it was beautiful and picturesque, and the price was right. And God did provide living. We had to do some sweat and elbow clean. I mean, what would you call that? Sweat equity. Yeah. Into that. And, we did that, and it was, actually a memory in the making. So we lived in that about a year and a half before we ended up building our home. But in the meantime, once we finally got it set and we moved in, we wanted to do something that we couldn't do in the suburbs. Like, the gateway to all homesteading typically for everybody is the simplest farm animal, and that would be chickens.
The gateway drug.
It's the gateway to it. And it starts out, we just wanted some chickens. And so we ordered some chickens and, from a hatchery, and we probably had about 25 chickens. And I think we ended up eventually with some friends. You know what? I'm going to go back just a second. I'm just going to tell you right now, we didn't know anything about chickens. We didn't know anything about, a chicken house and what they needed. So there was an old, storage building on the property, and we ended up turning that into like a place they can,
The chicken coop.
a chicken coop, but it wasn't set up like most chicken coops would set up. They just went in there and found a place, to wherever they were owned. And, we did not realize the mess chickens made. We didn't realize we didn't even have nesting boxes in there. I don't think we even
had those later, but
we added them later. We didn't even add them. We didn't even understand all that. So they were laying under the storage building in different places, and we would find piles of eggs. But you know what? It wasn't like we had Google and Instagram and Facebook where people could teach us all that stuff. You pretty much had to, you went to the library.
this was in 1999.
Yeah, and you did more stuff like that or went to somebody's house you knew. But you know what? We jumped out there and we had fun. And we learned a lot. Les says a lot that we could write books actually, I say that a lot. Yeah, we could write books on what not to do.
Oh, yeah.
Because those are the books we think we can do. So that's why one of the reasons we want to do this podcast is to tell you some of our stories and also let you know there is no exact formula to homesteading in any way. Homesteading needs to be a fluid concept. You're going to go out there. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to learn from your own mistakes. You're going to learn from other people. And I wish we had the platforms back then that we have now, because it's amazing when I follow a lot of Instagrammers and just see some of the things they do. I just love that. Even though
I think the title of that book would be Homesteading: What Not to Do for Idiots. Because we did a bunch of dumb stuff that did not work out at all.
And we'll share those over time in this podcast.
So we sold that single wide off that piece of property and we built a house there and we lived there several more years. And then the economy started to change and things started changing in my business. So we started seeking God on what we should do next. And we felt that we were told to put a for sale sign in the yard. So we put the for sale sign in the yard, and actually we never got the sign in the yard. We listed it with a realtor, and before she could put the sign in the yard, she brought somebody by and they made us an offer that was our asking price. And we felt like, well, that's God telling you to go forward with that deal. So we did. The house sold and we were packing up, moving out, realized we hadn't even told the couple next door that we were moving. So we had to run over there and, tell them what was going on. And God had actually opened a door to the piece of property that we're on now. We're even further out on 38 acres and living a more reasonable lifestyle out here. But we'll get into that more in other podcasts. Right now, we've got a question from Chris. Let me get this here. It says, I live in the city. I want to begin homesteading, and I don't know where to start. I'm seeing people on YouTube live a life with chickens and sheep as an early start. Should I start there or with a garden or something else? Christy, what jumps out into your mind on that question?
Well, I guess the first thing it depends on your situation. And, if your situation is living in an apartment or you already have a house with a backyard, you can first see where your finances are. If you're ready for that big jump, then you can take that big jump. And we'll talk more about that on what to look for and how to start with that in an upcoming podcast or two. But really, the first thing anybody can do, no matter where they are, is just start taking back things to the home, bringing everything back to the home bit by bit. And that can start in the kitchen. That can start with starting making bread from scratch, or making homemade spaghetti sauce because you just went to the farmer's market and you bought your tomatoes and your herbs and things like that. So you're supporting your local farmer, which is always a plus and a bonus to do. And you can start with that. You don't have to have your own garden. You don't have to have chickens or sheep or goats or any of that. And just start doing that. Homesteading can start right in your own home, even in an apartment. So look for ways to bring your everything back to the home. It can be even making detergent. So there's YouTube videos, there's blogs out there where people show you how to do all that. Great recipes, great homesteading cookbooks, things like that are a great start. We'll talk more about how to do more and more and getting started. If you have space for chickens or if your subdivision allows that, if you want chickens and you live in a subdivision, find out the rules of the subdivision, the covenants. Sometimes they say it's okay to have chickens, but look, a lot of them will say no roosters because neighbors don't want to be disturbed with that early in the morning or in the wee hours of the night.
Late in the night.
Yeah, chickens will crow roosters will crow even in the middle of the night. So it's not always a dawn breaking crow. But if anybody has questions, Chris asked us this question because we have friends that know we're going to start this podcast, and he's wants to know these things. So we just thought we'd go ahead and share his question. We would like to hear your questions. So if you have any questions, go ahead and direct message us at Instagram at Easy Farms Homestead or click the link below. Go ahead and ask us any questions you want that has to do with homesteading, getting started, or you've even been homesteading for many years and you just run into a situation which you would like to have some greater understanding. We'll be glad to share anything we have done or haven't done. And also, if you have a story of something that's happened, how you handled it, or just a funny story or anything you would like to share, please go ahead and direct message me with that on Instagram also, because we would love to read your story on the air.
So we look forward to those questions and stories as we grow this community. Please subscribe and consider giving us a 5-star rating, and be sure and share with your friends and family. This is Les and Christy with the Easy Farms podcast, where we're doing things from the ground up. We'll see you next week.